Welcome back to another episode of From the Couch Sports. This is episode 7, and I'm your host, Connor. And today I want to recap UFC 272, and I want to talk about a few other things around the sporting world. First, starting off talking about this card, I thought this was a really good card. For a pay per view, I guess, we're used to seeing 2, 3 belts on the line for pay per views. So it's especially like paying more. Like I understand why some people are like hesitant towards wanting to buy this, and some people weren't like super excited based on the card. But I thought the fights really they played out well. They were really good. I thought a lot of the fights were really fun to watch, and they did have some significant implications whether or not a belt was on the line. So I think it was really interesting. This is the first time that we've really seen a like a grudge like this. From my understanding, like two roommates, two best friends that you know went through a majority of their career together, and they had like a falling out a couple years back, and they hate each other from everything we've seen, and you know pairing up against each other. This was kind of like I wouldn't say a title eliminator fight, but for Jorge, I would say like if Jorge would have won, he probably would have been in contention for fighting for the belt again. And then for Colby, this fight, it just kind of keeps him where he is as the kind of number one contender of the division. And for Jorge, this was a tough loss, because one, you lose to a guy that you can't stand, but also a guy that used to be your best friend. And in some sense, I think it's kind of sad that this is what happened. Is we see two former best friends, and they're fighting for a chance to realize their dreams that they've been fighting for their whole careers. And for Jorge, he very well might not ever fight for the belt again. Even if he were to have beat Colby, it would have been a kind of tough. It would have been a tough sell to market the Usman 3 fight with Jorge based on the way the first two fights went. But at least getting the win over Colby, the number one contender, he would have been in the driver's seat. Especially like for instance, if Leon Edwards goes out and he beats Usman, then like Leon Edwards being the champ, Jorge getting a big win, he would be right in position. And so now he's kind of in a tough spot in his career. It was a tough fight for him. Colby's cardio is just crazy. He's constantly pushing the pace. He's clearly gotten better standing up and striking. There was a couple times where he was landing big combos on Masvidal that, like, not quite like putting him out, but he was beating them pretty bad. And Masvidal had some moments in the fight, but a lot of it was playing defense. He'd be playing defense. Colby's pushing him from the center of the octagon to the fence. And then once Masvidal's backed up to the fence, Colby's shooting for the takedown. And then he's defending the takedown. And then Colby would just be persistent. He just keeps going after it. And then, eventually he gets it. Even like Masvidal can only defend so many times. And then he's on the ground and he's in compromising positions. He did defend like the submissions really well. But he was in tough spots that were hard to get out of. And Colby just kept putting them there. It was a pretty dominant fight outside of a couple moments that Jorge had in the fight where, he was clipping Colby. There was one time where I want to say he dropped him once or twice. There was a big shot in the second round, I believe, and then again later in the fight. And at this point, he's had his gas tank sucked out of him basically. He's had this dude who's on top of him for 15, 20 minutes at this point, and just constantly he was getting outstruck, and so he lands the big shot, drops Covington. Covington gets back up, and at this point Jorge doesn't have like the gas to just go all in and like put him out like he would in the first round, for instance. And so like I see some people drawing comparisons to this moment being like the Nate Diaz like wobbling Leon Edwards and and pointing at him and showboating, and I don't think that was what it was at all. It was Jorge didn't have the energy at the moment to like put that out, and he did chase him down. He wasn't able to like go all in like he would have if he had more energy. And so, that was kind of the story of the fight. I said before, I felt like this was a 60-40 split, like 40% if Masvidal can keep this fight on the feet, land the big shot, he would win. He was very close to that happening, even though it was kind of a lopsided win for Colby, which was the other thing I said. I thought, Colby's going to take this in the deep waters, probably win by decision. And that, I was still surprised that even afterwards there was still no no level of mutual respect. They had to be separated in the octagon. Masvidal he's a really good sportsman about like taking the loss. He was not sitting there making excuses or anything. He just said that his wrestling wasn't there. And then Colby touches the mic and he turns that WWE persona on, which at this point it seems like he's kind of always got it turned on. But just instantly, he instantly has a call out for his next fight, and then also just kind of crapping on Jorge, after everything. Like, it just, that I think is what people don't like about him. Like, you just shared the octagon with this dude for 25 minutes. You guys used to be best friends. Whether or not you are now, that's different, but like you should at least be able to respect someone, not to like kick them when they're down, basically. But like going forward, I'm really interested in kind of both of these guys' careers. Like, what does Jorge do next? I feel like you have a bunch of big fights you can make with him. You can rebook the Nate Diaz fight. You could do like honestly, Conor McGregor versus Jorge I think would be a big sell. They're both like, they've said like in the past that Jorge is just much bigger than McGregor, and I don't think he really is. Like, McGregor could definitely come in at 170. I think that would be a good fight for both of them. Like, I think there would be a good chance that either one of them can rebound and get a big win. And not only that, it would be a huge pay-per-view event. The trash talk in the preview of it would probably be pretty good. Like, I think that would be a good fan favorite fight. And then obviously like a Jorge Masvidal versus Nate Diaz 2 would be fun. But I feel like that would kind of go more so like how the first one went. So I don't know if, at this point in his career, he's trying to make rematches or, new big money fights, And then for Colby, like, he's also in an interesting position because he's fought Kamaru twice. He's lost both times. And then like, he's still the number one contender. Does he fight another guy like who's coming up, like the winner of Gilbert Burns and Hamzat? Does he fight one of those dudes? I don't know. And he mentioned calling out Dustin. Dustin's talked about coming up to 170. I'm curious how this could play out, because I think it's an interesting fight. Even if somehow they could do this at 155. I don't know if Colby can make 155, but in Dana White's press conference after the fight, he mentioned the possibility of Colby coming down to 155 and fighting. And if that's the case, and even if that's not the case, Dustin Colby I think would be a fun fight. I don't think it's a headliner, but you could probably be like a co-main event, and the winner of that would be in like position to potentially fight for numerous belts. So I think it could be a really good setup fight, and it would be good for both of these dudes. Like, if Dustin were to go in and beat Colby, then Dustin's in position again to fight for the 155 belt because he just beat a welterweight like the number one welterweight. And then if he could also be in potential for fighting for the 170 pound belt too, because he just beat the dude who's the number one ranked guy. So, and then also like Colby, if he is able to cut to 155, from what I've read, he doesn't cut a lot of weight if he does cut weight at all. I've heard that he kind of like, in the past, I want to say I read an article from 2018, is like he was cutting down, like by dieting down to the weight. He wasn't like doing a water weight cut. So I'd be interested if he could make 155 and he could fight Poirier and he got a win, then he'd be like immediately in title contention at 155. I think that would be really interesting. But well, I mean, obviously, we don't even know if he can make that weight. There's even been talk of him going up and fighting at 155. He's called out Adesanya and whatnot before. So I'm curious kind of where both of these guys' careers go from this point. And then moving on to some of the other fights on the card. The co-main event was Rafael dos Anjos versus Renato Moicano. In this fight, Moicano took the fight on really, really short notice. It was at 160, and he went out there like guns blazing first round trying to get a kill, and RDA just wasn't having it. Like in the first round, Moicano went for like a lot of takedowns, and RDA was able to defend them, and then like pretty much flipped the script. And then from that point on to the end of the fight, RDA dominated in pretty much every aspect. On the feet, he was landing big shots. There was one point where he landed a big head kick, dropped him, and it looked like he was about to finish the fight. But Moicano was just in it. He was in it. He wasn't ready to lose this fight, and he was really just giving it his all. They talk about like heart in fighters a lot, and this dude for sure had it. Like he wasn't willing to go out in the fight, and almost to his detriment. Like there was multiple points in the fight where they probably should have stopped it. You know, the commentary team was saying it, and then I do think, you know, the referee I think did a good job here. He told Moicano going into the 5th round, like, look man, I need to see something or I'm gonna call this fight, and that gave Moicano just enough to start throwing some big strikes back. And not only that, like there was points in the fight where it looked like he was like hurting RDA, and I mean he never like wobbled him or dropped him or anything, but he was still landing big shots. And but besides that, this was a really dominant performance by RDA, really dominant on the feet, and then RDA took him down and just controlled him on the ground and beat him that way too. Moicano had a big cut. RDA was kind of cutting him up, like his eye was messed up. So that was kind of the story of that fight. I thought it was a good fun fight especially for a short notice. I'm actually really surprised that they still made this a 5-round fight, especially because Moicano was coming on short notice. And I mean, to my knowledge, I don't think he's really fought any or many 5-round fights in his career. But so that was just my take on that fight. And then the fight before this, also a really fun fight. Bryce Mitchell went in there against Edson Barbosa, and this was how I was really curious to see, you know, is Bryce Mitchell that good on the ground to be able to stop someone that is this good at striking? And Barbosa, like to start the fight, he was big leg kicks as he always does. But then like early in each round, Bryce would take him down and then kind of hold him there and, you know, throw a bunch of volume. And he was throwing some big elbows that were doing some damage. But outside of the elbows, he's just throwing a ton of volume and smothering Barbosa, not really giving him a chance to get up. And that's kind of how the whole fight went. There was a couple points in the fight where Mitchell was trying to like finish him, and it looked like he could have got close to it. But it was a really dominant fight. I want to say one of the judges gave Barbosa 25 points, which means he took he got 2 8 rounds or 2 10 8 rounds. So I mean I thought that was crazy. That's how dominant they scored Bryce Mitchell. Not just like a 30-27. There was one that was a 30-26, which means he took 1 10 8 round. But the 2 10 8 rounds, that's impressive. No matter how you see the judges. And I think he's a ton of fun to watch. I'm curious, like, where does he go next? Because now he cracks into the top 10. And being in the top 10 is a big thing, because now you get to fight someone like 6-7 range. Just like looking at some of the names of guys I don't think have fights booked. Like you have Giga, he's coming off the loss. That's like another very, you know, difficult striker. But if Mitchell can take him down, then it's like he could do the same thing. And then you got Josh Emmett. I don't think he has a fight booked. And then Dan Ige. So there's a few different guys that he could go. These are like next level up. And I mean, in reality, it's crazy to think that Bryce Mitchell could only be like a couple fights away from contending for the belt. And I think that would be a ton of fun to watch. I'm a big fan of Bryce Mitchell. I think he's fun to watch. I like to see an American who's really dominant on the ground, and he seems like a really good dude too. You know, even after he won, you know, he thanked God, he thanked Jesus Christ, and he was offering to donate the money to charity in Arkansas, and apparently Dana White was willing to pay for the charity as well. So that's a cool story as well, and you can just tell he's a genuine guy. And then the fight before the Bryce Mitchell fight, this was Kevin Holland's debut at 170, and this was a pretty fun fight as well. So he was going against Cowboy Oliveira, and the first round you could tell he was kind of stiff, just getting his feelings in there, like new weight class, but it's also been a couple months, like, you know, he's just getting in the swing of things, and you know, in the first round he's like having trouble closing the distance, but then like he does do a little bit of like work to the legs and whatnot in the first round, and then the second round comes around and Kevin Holland turned this thing up. He landed some big shots and was able to knock Cowboy out, and that was a bunch of fun to watch. For Cowboy, I think this is his fourth straight loss, so I'm kind of curious to see where he goes from this point. But he was game in there, and in the first round he was landing a bunch of big shots too on Holland. And then, you know, for Holland, I think he's a fun guy to watch. I'm curious to see like what the ceiling is for his career, because you know, at 185 he was stringing together a bunch of wins, and at one point it felt like, you know, this guy could be a couple fights away from the belt. And, you know, had he beat like Marvin Vettori or Derek Brunson, he probably would have been in position. And so now at 170, he could also go on like a similar run. And like he is going to face like some elite wrestlers eventually. So I'm curious to see at that point, hopefully he'll have like more experience and be able to defend it better. So I'm curious to see how his career keeps going. He's a ton of fun to watch. He's one of those guys like you got to tune in anytime he fights, no matter who he fights against, because he's always fun to watch. And then the fight that kind of kicked the main card off. This is like the probably the end of Greg Hardy's UFC career. Sergey Spivak, a dude who was way smaller than him. Once they were in there, you could tell he ragdolled Greg Hardy wrestling, and then he was able to finish him with ground and pound. And like it looked like he even knocked him out, because there was a point where like Greg Hardy was like waking up and like trying to figure out what happened, where he was, and everything. But this is, I think it's 3 or 4 straight losses, and not just losses, but like he's getting finished, and he's shown he can't fight on the ground. And then, you know, if he's fighting a big dude, like stand up against someone like who's good like Tuivasa, he's getting knocked out too. So, you know, I'm curious to see where both of these guys go now. I would imagine Greg Hardy's probably going to fight again for another promotion. And then Spivak, now he's got another big win on him, and you know, we saw like what the win for Tuivasa did over Hardy. So Spivak could see another kind of step up in opponent next. So that's interesting. And then just to touch on a couple of the prelims, I didn't get a chance to watch every single one of these fights, but some of the ones I did tune in for was the Jalen Turner Jamie Mularkey fight. This was a slugfest it was a 2-round fight. Both of these dudes were landing big shots, trading until Mularkey couldn't trade anymore, and Turner was finishing him in the second round. That was a ton of fun to fight, or ton of fun to watch. I'm curious where Turner goes next. I think there's the 155-pound division. There's a lot of young talent in it. I mean, there's just a lot of talent in itself. It's one of the best divisions in the UFC. So he could get another nice fight, kind of moving up the ranks himself in that. And then a 145-pound fight that happened was Umar Nurmagomedov. He was fighting Brian Kelleher, moving up. Brian was from 135, and Umar is like these guys from Dagestan are just incredible. It seems to me like the younger ones, like after Khabib is what I'm saying. So like Islam, Usman's the guy in Bellator, and then Umar. These guys throw a lot more strikes than like Khabib was doing. They have really nice kicks. They're using the kicks to kind of create distance, and then the moment that they get an opportunity, like a safe opportunity, they just attack the takedown and they get it, and then once they get it, they usually finish the fight. Like it seems like they're getting better and better. Like Islam's getting better. It feels like Umar, and then Usman's a guy who's like fighting in Bellator too, so he's been getting a bunch of finishes as well. So these guys are just they keep getting better, and now I'm curious to see who Umar fights next. I'm curious to see like how quickly he's gonna move into the rankings and everything. Just comparing like two guys that fought on this card that I think would be fun to watch. Like I wonder what like Umar versus Bryce would look like. I think this isn't something that we could see for, probably some time, because Bryce Mitchell's kind of on the rise, already in the top 10. So he's not exactly too far from the belt. And then Umar, I don't even think he's in the top 15. Maybe he cracks it tomorrow. But Kelleher wasn't ranked at 145, I don't believe. So I'm curious to see like what that win does for him as far as rankings go. And then Kelleher, I think he's just gonna go back to 135, and yeah, I mean he does good too. He's a fun watch. So I think he'll probably get a better matchup this next time. You could tell at 145, Umar was a lot bigger than him. So I think that went a lot into why he was able to win the way he did. But that's pretty much it as far as UFC goes. I know there was a couple other really good fights on the card. I just didn't get to watch them all. I was busy working during the start of the prelims. And then kind of moving forward, I want to talk some NFL Combine stuff. So the other day, in my last video, we were talking basically about the QBs, tight ends, and wide receivers. Now I've had a chance to kind of digest the rest of the days. Not exactly like I'm not going to give a breakdown of every single prospect. I'll talk about a couple of the big ones, and then here in the soon future, we'll probably do some more mock drafts, dive into a little bit more detail as far as the prospects go and what have you. But we had after QBs, wide receivers, tight ends, offensive linemen came up. There was a couple like really interesting ones there. The dude from Alabama, Evan Neal, he's huge. I think he's 6'7", but he's 330 pounds. Like he's a big dude. And then there's a couple other guys. Ike Ekwonu looks like really good. He performed well at the combine. A guy that I think is underrated at the moment, and I could see him kind of moving up the draft boards, is Trevor Penning. This is another really big tackle. I was watching him at the Senior Bowl a little bit, and then he looked well at the combine as well. I could see him kind of moving up the draft boards. There really is a lot of really good offensive linemen in this class. The big interior name is the Linderbaum, Tyler Linderbaum, I believe, and he wasn't able to do any athletic testing this week. I believe he's rehabbing an injury. But O-line prospects, I think there's a lot of good candidates there. No matter who your team is, if you need an offensive lineman, this is a good class for it. And then running back, we had a couple dudes test pretty well. Kenneth Walker, the guy from Michigan State, he ran a 4.38. And then you had Zamir White from Georgia, ran a 4.4. Breece Hall ran a 3.9. And then I want to say Dalvin Cook's little brother, also ran a 4.4. So, 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 like a lot of good running backs in this class. I don't know. I don't really think there's a Travis Etienne or a Najee Harris in this class. So I don't particularly see a first round pick being taken. If I had to pick one, like Kenneth Walker could maybe slide into the back of the first round. I think most likely these guys start going like middle of the second, and then like it's also one of those classes like where you can probably get in a third, fourth round pick. Your team could probably get a really good running back who's going to contribute right away. But apart from running backs, we had a lot of stuff kind of go on the defense, and that was like the last couple days. But the kind of standout of the combine was Jordan Davis from Georgia. This guy is 6'6" and 341 pounds. He ran a 4.78 40. And to put this in perspective, Patrick Mahomes ran a 4.8. So you got a guy who's 6'6", 341 pounds, plays on the interior D line that can also run that fast. That's crazy. I mean, watching some of this guy's tape, you could tell he has the speed for being such a big guy. And he not even just being a big guy, like he's got speed. He's a freak athlete. I think the only thing that he didn't test in was the bench press. I'm curious to see where he is there, but like I just like seeing like the big linemen kind of doing the bench because some of these dudes are rowing off 30 to 40 reps and whatnot. That stuff's kind of cool. But yeah, like and then he also had a 32-inch vertical. Like this dude Jordan Davis can probably do some nasty dunks on a basketball court. I'd be curious to see that. Like being 6'6" with a 32-inch vertical, he could probably play power forward pretty well. And then some other the D line I think in this class is a good it's a good position for this class. Kayvon Thibodeau had a good combine. He did most of the athletic testing, but then he didn't really run through all of the positional drills. And for whatever reason, it seems like the narrative this year is for teams to dump on him. Like they were talking negatively about him throughout the like on the NFL Network and like acting like he hurt his draft stock. And it's like, dude, there's multiple guys that don't do particular things at the combine for whatever reason, whether their agent recommends them not to, or they're not like they got some kind of injury where they're held out, or there's plenty of different reasons. And like to just kind of hate on him for this, but also not talk about like, he had multiple people not want to run the 40, and they're not critiquing that kind of thing. They just want to critique Thibodeau when he doesn't want to perform some of the extra drills, and he's saying that he wants to wait till his pro day. It's like everyone's gonna come out and watch Oregon's pro day anyway, so I really don't think this is a problem. I don't think the team. I'd be surprised if like a lot of teams are like taking him off the draft board for stupid things like this. I think it's a lot of more of a ridiculous media narrative that they want to push, more so than like something that's true concerns that NFL teams have. But besides him, Hutchinson had a good day, and then this Trayvon Walker from Georgia. This dude's huge. I think he's 6'5", 270. And then he's fast too. And like at Georgia, he played all along the line. They're saying like he's got a good potential to be like an edge rusher in the NFL. So he's a guy I've been seeing a lot of people talk about. I see people even potentially saying he could be a fringe top 10 pick. He maybe even break the top 10 with how the hype is rising with them. And then I want to say it's Majai Sanders from Cincinnati, the D end. He also put up pretty good numbers. A lot of people were really surprised. I think he came in at like 220, and he's also a big dude. But apparently he's been dealing with some kind of sickness. Like during the season, he was more like 240. So some people are saying this could like hurt his draft stock. I think if anything, it should boost his draft stock, especially if like he really is sick, and this is a guy who's like sick, like losing weight and trying to hold fluid down, and going out there and still putting up really good numbers at the combine. Like if anything, you should tell like this dude wants it all, like more than you should like be concerned over his lack of weight. It's some of these like Some of these things are ridiculous. It's like the whole Devontae Smith thing last year with the weight. Like, this dude is an elite wide receiver. You know, with the way the NFL is, a lot of rules benefit, wideouts, and he makes great separation. He runs great routes. The fact that he doesn't weigh a ton of pounds isn't really gonna affect him too much when the game actually happens. And for Sanders, like I understand, like, defensive line is a lot different than wide receiver. But I mean, from what it sounds like, he normally weighs more. This is just due to a sickness, and he's still like pushing through it, which is admirable. And then some of the corners, there's a nice like DB class too. The safety from Georgia, Lewis Sign, I think he's gonna be nice. He ran a good 40. Sauce Gardner, Kyer Elam looked really good. Trent McDuffie at corner. And then Derek Stingley, I was really interested to see kind of what he would run. He didn't run the 40, but he's also gonna be a big name who's in the mix for kind of top corner taken. And then there's kind of two guys that they underperformed on the 40 time, but like I said with Treylon Burks, I don't think that this is the be all end all when it comes to what teams are gonna value and as far as drafting. Like, Kyle Hamilton ran a 4.59, but when you watch him on the field, he closes the distance and is incredible at creating turnovers. He played for Notre Dame, so it's not like he played against some canned teams or anything. So I still think that he's going to be a really good pro. I guess it's possible that his draft stock slides because of this. I'd be curious to kind of see how far. I don't really see him getting out of like the 10 to 15 range. I'd be really, really surprised because a lot of people have talked about this guy like a generational safety. I realize that term gets thrown around left and right, but he really has he's been getting hyped up by everybody. For sure the best safety in this class. And then the other guy, Devin Lloyd, he ran a 4.66 from, I believe, and a lot of people kind of also throw in the same kind of similar, thinking it might affect his draft stock. A lot of people did have him kind of ranked in either at 1 or number 2 as far as linebackers go. The other big names, Nakobe Dean, and he didn't actually run the 40, so we might be able to get to see that at the pro day. I'd be curious to see. I think, at least from what I've seen, I definitely watched more Georgia than I did Utah. I think Nakobe Dean might be the best linebacker in the class. But I've also heard really, really good things about Devin Lloyd, so I don't think the NFL team should hold a whole lot of kind of stock into a slow 40, especially when there's plenty of game tape showing that these guys are faster with pads. Like, the 40, you don't even wear pads or anything. Like, it's not the same thing as being out on an actual football field and, going at football speed. So that's just my take kind of on the combine. Like I said, I want to get into some more content as far as the NFL draft goes soon, and then we got free agency coming up as well, so I'm excited for that. And then there's a couple kind of really awesome games in basketball lately. Jason Tatum today, he dropped 54 points against the Nets, and this was in a close win. It was a 6-point win for the Celtics, and he went 16 of 30 from the field and 8 of 15 from the 3. So this is going to be like, Jason Tatum's a young superstar, and it's crazy to me seeing some of this because a lot of the NBA that I kind of grew up watching is kind of gone. Like LeBron's the guy I want to talk about next. He put up 56 points last night. But LeBron's in year 19, and the end of LeBron it's coming sooner than it is later. And once LeBron's gone, once KD's gone, like a lot of these guys that a good generation of us have kind of grown up watching, their careers are going to be over, and there's going to be the new wave, the guys like Jason Tatum, Giannis, Luka, like there's a whole like new wave of superstar players coming. There's going to be a point where the whole like LeBron Jordan thing is like, I mean, you guys can argue about this like in off to the side because LeBron's not even playing anymore. Like the argument isn't even, it's not relevant anymore. And we might be able to see like who's the next guy who puts himself in that conversation. And I think that's really exciting to just think about. Because I like for pretty much my whole life, like LeBron's played 19 years. LeBron has been that dude like inconsistently. Like you'd think like once a guy gets into year 19, like that he wouldn't be great. Like year 19 Kareem like is like the old man on the Lakers. Like he's not the best center in basketball anymore. Year 19 LeBron is like still in the conversation for top 5 player in the NBA, like consistently putting up crazy numbers. He put up 56 last night in a win over the Warriors, 19 for 31 and 6 for 11 from 3. That's crazy. I know Kobe had like the 60-point game in his last career game, and Kobe and like Kareem are the closest we've seen to that because they also both played like I think they both played 20 years or 19 or 20 years, so they were playing like they had a really long career as well. But like LeBron is still at this high level of basketball, and we very well like we might see him finish right off into the sunset, shattering a ton of records. So I'm curious, like I'm curious to see the rest of LeBron's career. He's been the best player of my lifetime, pretty much, because I mean I was born like towards the end of the Jordan era. So that's kind of just my take on LeBron. I think it sucks that he's in LA right now. To be honest, when he went to LA a few years ago, I thought he should have gone to the Sixers. I thought you go play with a better big man. Like I think at this point especially, Embiid is the better big man than Anthony Davis. He's more reliable too, even though I know he's had his own fair share of injuries. And then they've got a better team around them too than this Lakers team where you're getting guys that are just old and kind of hoping to rejuvenate their career and see if they're going to be able to play like they did 10 years ago. And you're getting guys that don't fit each other well on a basketball court as well. Like, you know, Russ could probably be a lot better on a team where he's not playing second to LeBron. And, you know, I think they're just kind of hurting the end of LeBron's career. I'd be curious to see if he could go to another team that could actually compete for a championship. Like, you know, I was just thinking the other day, like, could you imagine LeBron on this current Cavs team? Like, if he could go back to the Cavs, this team is stacked and they've got a lot of really good young talent. If you add LeBron, they might be the best team in the East. It would be at least a fun way for him to kind of finish his career, or at least wait until his son is ready to go and go pro. So that's just my take on like what's going on basketball wise. I do have like, you know, another topic. I know it's gonna be the last topic. It's definitely on a darker note. This is another sporting event that happened. I want to talk about this subject specifically because I do not think that mainstream sports media will cover this at all. And if you look into this, this is one of the craziest craziest, most tragic sporting events that you'll ever hear about, and you might not ever hear about. And it's crazy. So they're basically two teams, Atlas and Queretaro. I'm totally pronouncing that wrong, but they're two Mexican cities, two Mexican soccer teams. They're playing each other. Towards the end of the game, like fights break out all throughout the entire stadium. Like it's crazy to see. Just imagine like watching I don't think the soccer teams have as many fans in the stands, but like imagine watching a football game and like the entire, like let's just say you're watching a rivalry, Broncos versus Raiders, and literally all of the Broncos fans start attacking the Raiders fans. And not just attacking them, but like trying to murder them. And that's what happened at this sporting event. The soccer game literally stopped. They got the players out of there because fans were rushing the field trying to get away from the violence and the fights that were happening. And like by brutal would be an understatement. You have tens of twenties of people like literally pulling people's clothes off, stomping them to death. And then you got media that doesn't even want to report the death. And so it's like it's sad. It's heartbreaking seeing all these people whose lives were taken away over a sporting event. Like my whole concept of this show is sport, from the couch sports. I'm just a normal dude. I'm a fan of sports. I enjoy watching sports. Would I ever want to fight someone to the death over sports? There's not a chance. I think that's crazy. Like if I understand like people get beer and like they get alcohol in their system, and maybe sometimes people when they get under the influence they get more violent. But like fighting over a disagreement, like throwing fists, is different than full on fans attacking the other ones. And like these are groups of fans, and they're clearly trying to kill people. And from what I've seen, like some outlets are reporting like 17 to 20 deaths at least, but tons of people injured. And the sad thing is like that the most of the reports like from main news outlets were saying that there was 0 deaths, just a bunch of injuries. And it's like, I'm not a doctor by any means, but if you watch these videos, you'd be mind blown, like to even think that these people are still alive. But to think that like if somehow they were like, I'm praying that some of these people were able to live, but like to think like that the media could also be saying the same thing and then saying and reporting that nobody died, like that's clearly not what happened. There were a lot of people dead. There's pictures and videos of their corpses like literally laying on the ground, spread out, their clothes ripped off, and then just literally beat to death, stomped, their heads kicked. Like it's a tragic event. I would say before you look it up, I would want to give you a warning. Like this is truly tragic. It's gruesome. I won't show anything even related to it. In this video, I want to bring attention to it if I can, because it's such a big event and it's not talked about at all. And like I feel like a lot of times we don't understand like how blessed we are to live where we live, but also how blessed we are to even be able to enjoy sports. Sports to me is an opportunity to come together. You can watch sports. Sports is where every people from all walks of life come together. White people, black people, Hispanics. Every single kind of ethnicity. Sports don't care about your sex, your gender, your race. They don't care about your political, opinions, your religion. Sports is a place where unity can happen, and rooting and being a fan of sports it's an incredible fun thing. The thrill of seeing, a Hail Mary to end a football game, or to see a game-winning shot in basketball, to see a spectacular knockout. These moments are awesome to watch, and the adrenaline that you get as a fan, these are moments that like to me, in 20 years later in my life when I'm older, I'm going to look back on my life and be able to say like, I was able to witness history as far as sports go. I think it's a really fun thing to say, and like living and watching through these things. But we also were sitting here in America. It's like we don't realize there's other places in the world where people can't just sit here and watch a football game. People can't just, even in America, like, fighting over a game, so be it. And it's not something that I would do, but like, in America, it's usually just a fight. you get fans that split it up, and then by the time it's split up, you get security pulling them out of there. But that's not how the rest of the world operates. The rest of the world, depending on where you go, is it's a lot scarier than what we see here in America. And like for a lot of people, not even to bring this topic up, I think is kind of crazy because I think we should shed light on it. You know, we are very fortunate to live in the time we are, to have access to, tons and tons of different sports, and like the time I live in is pretty cool because I can go and I can watch a basketball game from the 70s. I'm a Jets fan, and the Jets have not won we haven't even been to the Super Bowl since 1969, but I've watched the Super Bowl that happened like before my father was born. And like so we live in a time like this. We live in a time where you can go back and watch all of Muhammad Ali's fights, or Mike Tyson, Floyd Mayweather, even though it's 2022 and those fights happened years ago. And I think that's an amazing thing. We live in an amazing time, and we live in an amazing country. But we got to put it in the perspective. There's other places around the world where, they aren't as fortunate with all the access to everything that we have here, and there's a lot more violence and dark things that we don't get to see face to face every day here in America. I think it's an opportunity to just kind of reflect on, a lot of times you see the news kind of spew hatred about our country and create a lot of division. But when I talk about sports, to me, sports creates unity, and seeing an event like this, I feel like can do the same. It needs to create unity worldwide. I think that's what sports are made for, and it's tragic to see something like this. I'm keeping the families of all the people involved in my prayers, and I'd hope everyone does the same. Keep them in your prayers or your good wishes, and that's just kind of my take on that. It's sad. It's definitely take caution before you watch it. I'd recommend not showing like this to a kid or anything like that. But that's kind of all I wanted to touch on today. I wanted to kind of touch on all the more entertaining things like up front, and then kind of end with something that's not going to be covered a lot by many sports media outlets, but also something that's been weighing on my heart, and something that I felt the need to kind of put out there. But as always, let me know like what you guys think on the situations. What do you think about the fights this weekend, the NFL Combine? If you like the content, like and subscribe. But as always, thanks for tuning in.